U.S. suicide rates are the highest they've been since World War II.
Damn.
Age-adjusted U.S. suicide rates. This is from 1907 to 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I thought it was kind of interesting to note, it sounds pretty, but if you look historically, it looks like, obviously you're looking at like Depression era here and stuff like that.
I mean, yeah, that's where you see the highest spike here is the
You
Great
definitely
Depression.
see a shit ton.
And I mean, that literally, people don't, I think modern people look at it historically, and we're so far from it now that they're kind of removed, but there was a modern standard of living back then, and the bottom fell out of it.
Right.
In a way that even the fucking housing crash of 2008.
The Great Recession.
I mean, even if you look years before, though, back to like 1907 and shit, like people were killing themselves a lot more back then.
Well, if you look at the beginning of the Great Depression, I mean, that's like literally.
Because by the time you get to the Great Depression, I mean, obviously it spikes way up.
Well, it's the term like losing the farm, dude. That's pretty much
Right.
where that almost even comes from.
But it's interesting the reverse correlation that war seems to have on suicide.
Right, as soon as the war starts,
especially like a war
suicide
like
plummets.
World War II.
It
World
plummets.
War II seemed to give us a common sense of purpose. People stopped killing themselves.
Yeah, it's
Purpose,
like, oh,
Paul.
we got something to do.
Interesting.
We'll die in the war instead.
Yeah,
I've
we'll
never
die
seen
over
this.
there.
I've never
And
seen
then
this graphed out
as the
like that.
war ends, suicide skyrockets back up, but it doesn't go anywhere near where it was before the war.
I mean, 1999, it seems, was like the suicide low.
I mean,
yeah, like back in by the time the look,
because the '90s kicked fucking ass,
Clinton
dude.
had a great. I mean, like, say what you want about Clinton as a president, he had a pretty fucking rip-roaring economy,
He did.
especially for this country's standards.
There was a lot of positivity in politics too. There was
Right.
there was like a feeling of accomplishment in that presidency that I remember being in the popular culture.
So I mean, like, it's no
So it
surprise
makes
there's a
sense.
low there, but they've been climbing steadily ever since.
What goes up must come down.
And it looks like we're up to a new high that we haven't seen since probably. I mean, yeah, like
Since World
since
War II.
World War
What
II.
goes down must go up.
But,
so we're pretty much reached like late World War II era.
Yeah, we're like
suicides.
basically mid World War II suicide
and
levels.
the trajectory seems to be pretty heavily up.
Yeah, it looks like that might that doesn't look like
Well,
it's
fuck this article
going back
because I
up.
don't care what this article says. What do you guys think is behind it?
Well, let me just offer some facts out of the article.
Who cares about facts, TJ?
I do.
Okay.
In 2017, 14 out of every 100,000 Americans died by suicide. Okay.
Facts not feeling, TJ.
That's
Facts,
a
not feelings.
30
Feelings, not facts, TJ.
That's a 33% increase since 1999. The highest age-adjusted suicide rates ever recorded since 1942. Rates-
Listen to what happened to rock and roll after 1999. There's your fucking answer.
Yeah, that's probably true. So yeah, now that I got those little factoids out, what were you gonna say, Paul?
I'm just asking, like, what do you think is leading to this obvious trend upward of suicide?
I think it's the rise. I mean, like I know there's like tons of other factors. There's definitely economic factors. There's definitely things where people feel like they can't make it in this world for whatever reason. We see like examples in our own circle of friends and family of people who have like kind of failed to launch and stuff like that. So I think there's that
That's
going
on the rise, too.
I think that
It's
there's a lot of
incredibly
people
common.
who have seen fucked up shit overseas at this point because we've been in so many fucking endless wars, and we know suicide rates are really high for that demographic.
Yes.
We know that as trans people are getting more accepted, that more people are maybe making that decision to come out as trans, and they have a high suicide rate. I don't know if their suicide rate is
it's very
higher when
few-
they come out.
Yeah, still very few people.
But that's not a lot. I think that really for me, and it's an angle that not a lot of people will talk about, but I think there's a philosophical angle to the rise in suicides.
Oh, I completely
I
fucking
think that
agree.
there is. I think that
People really don't want to talk about that? That's so obviously
I mean,
true.
people want to talk about numbers and facts and figures and measurable data, but I think
This is the
there's-
era of the dismal, dude.
Yeah, and I really think that also, religion is dying. All these old sources of meaning are kind of dying off, and people
Yeah.
are kind of seeing how ludicrous they are, and people are kind of realizing that, maybe they're not going all the way to nihilism, but they're probably realizing there's a lot more truth in nihilism than they previously wanted to recognize.
I mean, there definitely seems to be a spike in mistrust of government agencies and established authority sources.
Oh, for sure.
And that, to me, is indicative of a more pessimistic society, a society that is starting to not really buy the roses and white picket fence fucking shit we were sold back in the 50s that seemed to kind of sustain us through the 80s and 90s. That idea that you could get a good job and get a little house somewhere and get married and pop out a kid. That was pretty attainable from the 50s on for a huge swath of this country. And I don't even really think it's less attainable. I think that people are genuinely questioning whether they want that. Like, I think that plays a role in this. Like, when you start to have a genuine chunk of our society, which is an aging society, by the way.
Right.
True.
Questioning the traditional raise up a couple of kids, work a normal job because of the unavailability of those kinds of stable positions or because of a philosophical desire for something else for their lives. I think it all plays a factor in this. To ignore the philosophy angle in this chart, I mean, you don't think that there was a philosophical angle to the rise in suicides in the Great Depression?
Right.
That you see?
And also, I mean, like, obviously there was some kind of crisis going on in the early 1900s as well. I mean,
I'll tell you what the crisis in the early 1900s was.
Yeah.
From its inception till about, I don't know, the 50s maybe, this country was a meat grinder to live in. A standard of living that doesn't even mirror our own existed.
Right.
You know what I mean? People were sick, hungry, poor. Starvation was a real fucking threat during a lot of those years.
True.
The Dust Bowl happened in there.
Yeah. Well, that was during the Depression era, I think.
Right.
But I mean, in those early years, like, I mean, we're talking about like robber baron. I mean, like, you're still in the robber baron era. You're still in the fucking,
economic disparity was huge.
Unfettered, laissez-faire capitalism
There
going
were
on.
no safety net for many of those years that was accessible in any way
Right.
to
There was
people
no
on the
sort of-
fringes.
There was no sort of like social programs at the time.
Social Security didn't come back to I believe that was like the 1930s.
In
Right.
response
In
to
response
the
to the
fucking
Great
absolute
this.
disaster that was the Great Depression. So
I mean, I have to agree with you guys. It's definitely a philosophical angle. It kind of makes sense to me. Like, if you look out in our society and talk to a lot of people are overwhelmingly, especially Americans, are pessimistic. They're not optimistic about the future. If you look at most metrics, which people pride themselves on, like home ownership, that's down because, of course, housing increasingly becomes unaffordable. Things like
and less
homelessness.
desirable
Yeah,
as the economy changes and as
So,
jobs
Well,
move.
homelessness is up.
Speaking
drug
to
overdoses are
what
up.
Scotty was talking about, here's a thing about Americans are becoming less happy, and there's research.
Well,
to
it's
prove it.
obvious. If you look at and interact with most American people, they're not happy with the way society is going. Like, why do you think we're running back to this? Like people like Trump who are telling us, well, look, if we go back to our traditional values, and this is something that comes in with the book, The Lucifer Principle. You read Howard Bloom's, he talks about these kind of ideas of how traditional values always come as this kind of like thing that's going to save us when our society is like kind of in a crisis and we're lurching. Like, where do we go from here? That's what kind of we're talking about. There's people that want to hold to the past, and the future's uncertain. So where do you go? And people have obviously at this point elected to go, hey, we're going to go back to this 1950s America. We're going to make America whiter. We're going to make it.
We're going to make America great again.
It's going to go back to what it was because that's when we were the best. That's where, because in 1950s America, largely in the world is viewed that way. And you can look back, like, we beat the fucking Russians. They were going to space. We went to fucking space. We did all these achievements. We went to the fucking moon.
Or our society, in some ways, really was ascendant, but there was
We
a
were
lot
looking
of fucking,
higher, though. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
We were looking outward. We were not looking inward.
So here it says, on a scale from 1 to 3, where 1 represents not too happy and 3 means very happy, Americans on average give themselves a 2.18, just a hair above pretty happy. That's
not
a significant,
pretty happy. That
that's
sounds
a
like something you
significant decline from the nation's peak happiness as measured in the early 1990s. Go ahead,
pretty
Paul.
happy. It sounds like how you describe your dog.
He's pretty happy.
Yeah, he's
Like,
pretty
ugh.
happy.
Man, you know what, dude? I get a lot of shit for being kind of a negative guy. People don't really like a negative guy.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, I'm so glad that nobody that knows me would describe me as pretty happy.
Paul's pretty happy.
Paul's pretty happy.
Look how happy he is.
Goes through life with a fucking dumbass, empty-ass, shit-eating grin on his face. Totally oblivious to anything that means anything. Yee fucking ha! Scotty's pretty happy.
I'm pretty happy, guys.
He's
Ugh.
a pretty happy guy.
I'm glad
What
I
about TJ?
surround
How are you
myself
feeling?
with negative, realistic fucking people.
I feel happy.
Not just
pretty
happy.
happy.
Pretty happy, buddy.
No, I'm happy. No.
No, you know what, dude?
Not too happy. Not too happy.
I got to
Take
be
it down.
honest with you, TJ.
Yeah,
Not to
what's
get
up?
too deep into this.
Yeah.
But happy is better than pretty happy to me. Happy means, okay, I've thought it through. I've found something in my life that makes sense to me that I can focus on, whatever the fuck it is, and I've found my happy. You can respect that in a person. Pretty happy, though? How non-committal is that? I'm shuffling around through my life. I'm pretty happy.
I'm pretty happy.
Fuck, man.
It's when someone like, and it's such a fucking common thing when someone asks you like, "Well, how are you doing?" and people go, "Fine." I make it a point never to say fine. I'm not fucking fine.
No, I hate
I'm
that
good.
too.
I'm just like I'm good, or like if I have a bad day, whatever. It's another day.
I just don't want to be asked most of the fucking time.
Yeah.
And another, how you doing, Paul? Are you all right?
You don't want to know.
doing,
That's the fucked up thing about that
Paul?
one. Is you don't want to know. People don't want to hear like, actually, no, I'm not. I'm fucking depressed as shit, and I'm living in a fucking stinking hovel. My dog is shit in the corner 4 times this week, and I think he hates me.
Paul, TMI.
That didn't happen, by the way. I
TMI.
hate to cast aspersions at Dinor. He's a very good boy.
TMI, Paul. I didn't really care.
Yeah, see? People get
Just
creeped.
say fine and move on.
Just say fucking fine.
You're supposed to say hunky-dory or something, man.
Paul, your leg is blown off. How you doing? I'm fine.
Sometimes you'd be like, hanging in there. Or some shit.
I'm making it happen, you know.
Oh, do you always?
You know how it is.
I like ups and downs, strikes and gutters. I use that sometimes.
Ups and downs, strikes and gutters.
You don't have to even ask Paul, really. If you know anything about Paul, you can already tell Paul's mood within about a minute of seeing him for that day. Hey, Paul, what's up? What's up? It's like, okay, shit. Let's leave Paul alone.
I want Paul to just start answering, I am exquisite. Good
I'm
sir."
pretty happy.
Hey, did you enjoy that fucking clip, you piece of shit? Well, guess what? We got a Patreon.
It's true.
YouTube doesn't pay us. In fact, we've been flagged as a hate speech channel. Do you feel like you just saw hate speech? Well, YouTube thinks you did.
I sure don't.
Yeah, I don't either. We might be hateful bastards, but I don't think we're hateful in that way.
And we don't speak.
And guess what? We want your money.
We kind of need it.
We actually, yeah, we do. That's
kinda
a
need
better
your money.
word is need. Seriously, we try to do the most we can for our patrons. You can just ask anyone who's a patron. We have 4,500 or so of them, and they're in our comments all the time. You can just ask them outright, like, is it worth it? And they'll tell you it is. Links down below. Do it.